What's up, everybody? You guys are the first to see that intro, which was done by our amazing tech manager, Sebastian Salvador. So thank you so much for getting that to us ASAP today. It was phenomenal. How are you doing, Edgar?
I'm doing really good. I'm excited to be here. I like this intro, by the way. So shout out to Sebastian for one sharing the gifts of his creativity with us, but two for getting it done, and it looks great. How are you doing, Deanna?
I'm doing good. I'm excited. I know this is like our breakthrough moment for Midwest Chicana to be on the platform under Latinx Education Collaborative. So I'm super excited for this.
Excited about this.
Yes.
Are you excited about this?
Because I think it's an opportunity that to bring more viewers and to bring more communities together and to really share, which I know you're going to do in a moment, about how we work together and how that impact happens, and really just having that opportunity to be ourselves and bring our creativity to the forefront, just like Sebastian did.
Absolutely. Well, I think as we're thinking about continuing to stay connected to community and really continue to talk about the work that we're doing and how we can help and how we can improve. I think these are great platforms to do that, right? To share a little bit more about the work, some of the exciting stuff that's happening, and also to continue to a conversation with community about how we do the work and why we do the work and what's important about it all. Um, I I was really excited to see Barrio be
Yes.
yesterday. Do you want to share a little bit more about Barrio
Yeah.
La Cafe and like the space and the spot and why we do that kind of work?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had our first barrio for 2024 yesterday at Ola Cafe with Araceli, and she is phenomenal. So I had not been there yet, and walking into that space, it was just like you felt like this is the space I need to be in. Like this is my space, and that feels so good to do that because I know growing up, I didn't have a lot of those spaces. I went to Casa Feliz when I was a kid with my grandparents, and that felt like back then, like, yeah, this is my family. Like, even though most of them weren't my family, they were my family because we all just got together there in the mornings and hung out. And I haven't been able to find that kind of space since then. And so doing these barrios has kind of been that, right? But in multiple amazing spaces because we all connect in different ways. And I think bringing in small businesses the way we do brings in a connecting point for everybody, right? We're not
Yeah.
just solid in one spot, or we're not just at the LEC, but we're opening the doors to many different communities and supporting our entrepreneurs is what we do. So, and another thing is Barrio is just easy, right? I mean, it takes work to do it. It takes work to market. So shout out to Lexi Rios for always marketing amazingly. But it really is just about bringing community together. And I think we all just do that organically without even thinking about it.
Yeah, what I love about Barrio and some of the activities that we've been doing over the last couple of months, particularly with you joining the LEC team and us supporting and keeping the Latino Arts Foundation growing and thriving. I think it's this opportunity to really think about representation, right? To think about representation, particularly when it's student centered, right? We're thinking about the young people in our community and why we engage with folks, right? So, educators, we know representation means in classrooms. We know what happens when um, teachers reflect the students that they serve, right? It's going to increase better outcomes for young people and it's going to improve experiences. We're thinking about parents and caregivers and like how they're navigating schools and how they're navigating life, right? And then how we're supporting them to make sure that they're able to be present and have access to their children's education. We're thinking about artists and their impact on young people, right? And what is it like to have a Latino artist that's going to teach you about creating music or painting or calligraphy, whatever it is, right? But that connection and the ability to be creative and to be transformative in that way. Entrepreneurs and thinking about like, all right, a lot of the parents and caregivers and educators we serve are also entrepreneurs. And whether they're entrepreneurial in the classroom, whether they're entrepreneurial in the homes, whether they're actually doing small businesses and whatnot, like all these activities have an impact on our young people, right? And so for me, Barrio is a great space for the community to come together from all walks of life, and really celebrate us just being in the same space. And like, I think being able to share ideas and be able to
Mhm.
figure out how do you actually collaborate, how do you actually create those conditions for our young people to be successful.
At this barrio, we had Cornell Ellis as
Yeah.
our amazing speaker. So we do try to have speakers every so often, and we definitely wanted to have Cornell show up for Black History Month. Give us your relationship with Cornell and just what he does, and for the people who haven't been able to see that or weren't there to see him in person.
Yeah, so Cornell Ellis, he is the leader of an organization called The Block, Brothers Liberating Our Communities, and their specialty and their focus is on increasing and retaining Black male educators. The national statistics around that are 2% of educators are Black men. And there's so much conversation about why Black men in education are critical to the success of our young people. And so he's been doing an incredible job of, one, creating awareness around that, but two, trying to find solutions on how do you actually improve those conditions, right? And how do you actually create the environment in where Black men can be successful? And so he's an educator himself. He is somebody who is committed to ensuring that our young people have diverse talent, right? Like have diverse folks as part of their folks. And Cornell is actually somebody who is really into history and context as well, right? He's somebody who just innately understands and is creative and curious about like what drives things. And so for him, he's an entrepreneur. You know, he wears that hat. He's an educator. He wears that hat. He's a dad. He wears that hat. And so, you know, he's a really good example of like the community that we're building, right? And who's a part of it. All his work is really about, again, improving the outcomes and conditions and experiences of our young people. So I'm glad that he showed up. I know he's got some big plans. I think he announced some big plans. And so I'm excited to see what he does next and how he continues to grow. So
Yeah,
thank you,
absolutely.
Cornell, and thank you for being there.
Absolutely. And just appreciate you, Edgar, because I know a lot of people were like, oh my God, Edgar, he's so phenomenal and has been such a great support system and mentor to a lot of people here in Kansas City. So I want to give you this platform, Edgar, to just really, just talk about the work you do, what you want to see for the future of now these 3 organizations you have. I mean, you've what I see, and I'm sure a lot of us see, is that you've taken on the Latino community and really are here to truly support them, right? And even with Latino Arts Foundation and coming along with LEC, it was just, I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? It's like, why not? And that's exactly what we talked about, right? Just it makes sense because it's art and education. They both align. So I'd love to just hear from you, like, what you see as all this amazingness and dopeness coming out of this. Like, what do you want to see?
Well, first, I want to just kind of shift a little bit of language. So I'm not taking over any platform. I think I appreciate you sharing the platform, which you have built. Too, I appreciate the kind words, and uh, I'm gonna just remain in gratitude with that. So thank you for that. Um, I genuinely believe in the power of our community, and I think with organizations like the LEC and Revolución Educativa Red and LAF, um, I think it's important that like organizations exist that are thinking about our future and are thinking about our young people and the opportunities that they're going to have, and the possibilities that they can access, right? To me, like the undercurrent for me is representation, right? Um, and I think a lot of our community is sometimes excluded from these spaces. A lot of our community are courageous and show up in these spaces, and in some ways are dehumanized, right? Um, I think that's also part of being in community, right? Like you're also building community organizations, and sometimes we don't get it right. right? And so figuring out how to like stay in that tension, and stay in this idea of like ultimately the work itself and the mission and the goal is important. Um, how we get there is a negotiation, and how we get there is like learning and being in community and listening and hearing the great things, hearing the not so great things, and figuring out how we're moving forward. Because at the end of the day, like it is that tension that allows for the growth, and it is that tension that like we all share, right? We all walk into spaces where we may not feel like we belong. We all walk into spaces where we may not necessarily know what we're doing or how we're going to do it, but like we show up anyways. um, what I appreciate about the organizations, one, we have incredible leaders, right, that are leading the organizations, right? You know, we have Susana, we have you, we have Christy, we have Ivan, we have Lexi, Sebastian, and Luis. I'm sure I'm missing somebody somewhere along the way. Trisha, you know, there we go.
Bertha.
Right? You know, like we have incredible folks that are a part of this and have you know, shared a part of their journey with us. And I think that that's really cool. So for me, you asked me about the future of our community. I'm excited that we help co-create that future, right? And I think it's one where our identity is what empowers us, right?
Mhm.
Um, that's not just, and again, I know this, right? All Latinos are not the same. We transcend race, we transcend language, we transcend nationality, all these things, right? And so there's more to us than just being Latino, but I think being Latino is such a unifying force,
Mhm.
and there's so much that we align with as a community, which I'm excited about. I'm also starting to see a couple of things within our community that I just like energize me, right? I'm starting to see more collaboration
Mhm.
amongst organizations. I'm starting to see people lean into more tension and conversations. I'm starting people to see unified and showing up to places like City Hall and you know, advocating for things. I'm starting to see people just like do these things, and I'm sure they've been done in the past, but like I think things ebb and flow, right? And it
Mhm.
feels like we're in a resurgence here. We attended the city's State of the City, uh,
Mhm.
Kansas City State of the City address on um, this week, and Mayor Lucas was talking about how Kansas City is on fire,
Mhm.
right? How this community, in a good way, not
Yeah,
only
not literally.
right, not literally, but like in a great way. And so for me, the future, hopefully, is that Kansas City continues to be on fire, but that more people within our community actually have access to that.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that they brought in a Paseo senior
Right.
who dreams are to become an entrepreneur in creative writing. Those are things that you just not did not hear, I don't know, even years ago, even when I was growing up, that's just not something you did as a career. And to have him go up there and just be like, this is what I'm doing, that hit me really hard. Like, yeah, that's it right there.
You know, we also saw like the arts very present. Melissa
Mhm.
Ferrer Seville, the first poet laureate of Kansas City, was opened up the space, right? And so she set the tone for the conversation. We also we saw a lot of things, right? We saw a silent protest there as well,
Mhm.
and I think it was interesting just to be a part of the entire conversation because like that's community, right? Not everybody in that room agreed with each other. Not everybody in that room um, maybe gets along or whatever.
Yeah.
The reality was, but they're all there because they know that Kansas City and this community is important, and like, but we all have to show up. So that was a cool space to be. We've met a lot of interesting people this week too, right? And like, it's interesting to figure out like how do these conversations actually impact education?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like they all fit in a different way. And that's what I'm learning as being a part of this organization is the how everything is just opening up and it's like everybody has a place to fit. And like, how do you help support that
Yeah.
to become alive?
I've been in some conversations recently around just, you know, college access and what that means for our community and whatnot. And one of the things that I think I'm learning about this is that, um, at least one of my takeaways is that I really want our young people to have choice and agency in what they choose to do after high school, right? I
Mhm.
want them to be well prepared for whatever decisions they're going to make, whether they go straight into the workforce or they choose a different pathway or go to college. Like, I want them to be able to do that, and to do that proudly, and to do that with confidence, right? And I think that that's part of the challenge, is like there are so many groups that are innately tied to the success of young people, right?
Yeah.
We think about educators, we think about the representation, and how do we support Latino educators in the space, and how do we help increase the number of Latino educators in the space. And that work is incredibly difficult, right? I think finding support that is, one, comprehensive, but also individual, is a real challenge. Um, Getting young people to get excited about education and the possibilities in that work can be a challenge, but it's like the teachers that we serve and that we work with, like, they're excited about the future, right? And they understand the challenges that they're facing, but they also have a vision for what's possible, and that's inspiring.
Yeah.
Think about parents and caregivers and the folks that we are in conversation with daily, and the challenges they're navigating, right? They're trying to figure out how to ensure that they have enough income to support the families. They're trying to figure out how do they have enough knowledge and to navigate difficult environments, both at work, at home, and at school. And so if we get folks, not give folks, actually, let me correct my language there, but if we like actually unlock the energy and the power within our community, like, it's a transformational thing for our young people, right?
Yes.
So that's how I'm thinking about this work. And that's how I'm thinking about the opportunity to partner and to collaborate and to figure out different strategies on how we actually show up for our young people. Um, you know, 5, 6 years ago, when I had the idea for the LEC, and a fleeting idea, it was rooted in this idea that, like, I would walk into spaces in schools and see a large number of Latino students, but not see any Latino staff,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Latino students in Kansas City, in the public education system, they make 30% of schools. In Kansas City, Kansas, it's 60%. Like, our students are in classrooms today, right? When we look at their outcomes, though, and we look at their academic achievement and their growth, we're not seeing what we want to see, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we're taking a look at literacy rates for our community, we're not seeing what we want to see. And if we don't get it right when they're young, like, these challenges persist, and then we can't catch up, which means, like, opportunities are limited long term. And so I think that we have to figure those things out. And the
Yeah.
great thing is there are a lot of people working on these issues, right, from their own kind of vantage points and from their own places that they want to work with. And so how do we align those things, and how do we help support the community that exists?
Talk to me a little bit about identity. I know we've talked about a lot of that this week, and it's actually opened up my mind more about how identity is really that groundbreaking piece to really bring that power to the forefront. I mean, tell me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I've definitely been on my journey of identity. Who am I? Like, what am I about? What do people think about? What do I think about? Like, where's that balance? All this kind of stuff. Um, I think particularly, I think about this in from the lens of educators. There's a lot of research that exists around educators who know themselves, who understand what they're bringing to the table, who understand their cultural assets, who have pride in their sense of identity,
Mhm.
and are able to walk into spaces which may reject some of those identities, and still thrive. Uh, those are great role models for our young people, right? And so if we can help instill pride in your identity in some way, shape, or form, or if we can help you unlock your identity, or if we can help you, like, go on that journey to question and to think and to, like, that makes a world of a difference for our young people. Because if you walk into a classroom or into a school, or heck, if you go into um, a city meeting, or you go into a funder meeting, and you know who you are, and you bring that confidence and with that with you, like, it changes things. It's a transformative energy. And so, and it's also important to understand that particularly Latino identity is complex, right? There's so many different types of way of being Latino, and there's no wrong way to do it, right? And definitely there's no right way to do it, but there's a like exploring that. What does it mean? How do you connect to this identity? How do you connect to Latinidad overall? And how do how are you in relationship with that? And so I think for a group of students who are coming growing in our schools, like that wrestling is important because the questions that you and I have are probably questions that they're facing in schools, and if they're not seeing people they can talk to about that, if they're not seeing people who mirror some of their culture, their identity, if you're not seeing people who maybe speak their language, like those questions you may not be able to ask or you may not be get answers to. And so identity is important in that way. It's at the foundation of the work we do. It's also like how you think about belonging. So
Yes.
I'm ranting, so my apologies.
You're good. This is what we're here for. This is what the podcast is for. This is what we do, right? Like, I want to bring it back to how we were, in 2020, 2021?
Back in the day. So, belonging is such a powerful force in our schools and in our communities, right? Like, I think to be human is somewhat to want to belong, right? To want to belong to something bigger than yourself. And identity is a part of that conversation. How you think about who you are also can inform like where you think you belong. And or how you think about who you are can also inform like how you show up in places where you don't think you belong, right? And so having clarity around that and having clarity around all this allows you to show up, and then that leads to authenticity, right? That leads to all these other larger conversations, and that's all complex. So
it is. And I think just even sitting here right now, look, I got tattoos. I'm a Chicana. I come differently than others, but the acceptance that I felt within all the organizations that I support and they support me has made it even easier for me to bring to light the work that we're doing, right? And it's becoming even more so authentic because of that. So, I mean, how do you feel about that? Because you have an array of people that are on your team that you support. I mean, that has to be like the best thing to wake up to and just know that it's just so diverse and inclusive and beautiful.
Well, I appreciate that you say that. I think we're like as an organization, we're an organization, right? And so we're constantly navigating those waters. I our team is dope.
Yep, absolutely.
Right? I think we have incredible people who are also strong people in general, right? They are strong people that are committed to a cause, and they are willing to show up in that way, right?
Yeah.
And I think I'm learning and trying to get better at this idea of like what does actually support mean for folks, right? What is it? How do you think about like creating space and time and energy around supporting people and doing that? And that's something that I'm working on, right? And understanding like what people need and figuring out the individualization of that, and like people need different things and at different times, and trying to be more present and thoughtful around that, I think is a journey, right?
Yeah.
Because it also ties to like, well, we got stuff to do. And we got we got things to get done, and we have commitments that we have to keep, and so there's some compassion and grace, and then there's also of this it's tension, right? And I don't know if there's any way to overcome it. So
Yeah.
my learnings are around like with anything is like tension and intention. There's growth, and I also have people on people on the team are love to hold people accountable.
Hey, you're human, right? And I think that's the most amazing thing, that you're not just like, oh, this is all butterflies and amazingness and unicorns, because I mean, we don't show up that way. we don't show up that way ever, right?
I mean, I like try not to use ever or not because like we may show up those ways,
I guess.
depending on who's looking. Like there's people with different perspectives, and I think that that's important too, right? Like feedback. I think about feedback and I think about how we do our work, right? Like feedback is feedback, and
Yes.
so we also have to figure out like what we do with it and how we show up, and like is it feedback that we receive and accept? Is feedback that we don't accept? Like how do we incorporate it? How do we not incorporate it? How do we like? So it's we're talking about really complicated issues, right? That drive the work that and I say they're complicated. They may not be complicated to other people. They're definitely complicated for me. So I'm speaking from my own kind of experience. And yet it's worth it, right? Because if we can learn how to wrestle with these things, then we can show up for others differently. And we can figure out, how to be good humans along the way.
Absolutely. So with this podcast, the audio is going to be coming, and it's going to be our team members, Lexi, Sebastian, Yvonne, and Luis, and myself. And what we're all talking about here, and the fact that we can just talk openly and talk about things going on in our communities, within ourselves, on all levels, is kind of what you've opened this door for, Edgar, for our team to do. And I think it's just a great way of not only sharing out, but sharing in, because we've done a little bit of pre-recording, and it's just the amount that we are so much alike that we didn't even realize or ask is coming to light. And I think that it makes it even easier for us to work together in the end.
I want to acknowledge one thing. We get some feedback around like, oh, y'all are super active on social media. Like, is that all you do? And I think it can be a fair criticism sometimes because like we are active on social media. Like that is part of our strategy, right? And I think fundamentally, one thing that I think about from social perspectives and this kind of content and why it's important is because there are also very few spaces for Latinos to have a platform and for educators to have a platform and to be able to go on. Now they can do it themselves. There's nothing stopping people from like doing their own things. Totally cool. But the reality is like we get also feedback that people feel invisible sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, people sometimes aren't seen or aren't heard. And so how do we elevate representation, right? How do we elevate awesome educators? How do we elevate awesome artists? How do we elevate the people doing the work? And like, because what I've also learned is that there are people outside our community watching us.
Absolutely.
Right. And there are people that are not our audience targets or whatever, like that are watching us and learning. And, we'll get a random email here or there being like, hey, I really appreciate you talking about this. Or, hey, like, I didn't know that would be an issue. And so people are watching and learning, which is why we take advantage of these kind of platforms and opportunities because like they need to exist.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just giving your team that opportunity to come to light allows them to feel like we can do that with others as well, right? Because if you feel like you're enclosed, it's not always easy to be able to invite other people in to do that. So appreciate that ability to do that.
And like it takes trust, right? And it takes the same things that we're navigating inside of the organization, we're navigating outside of the organization, right? As people. And so I try to think about like Midwest Chicana is a great platform. And I've seen some of the conversations that you've had with others, and they're powerful conversations, right? And there's something healing about being able to tell your story, right? There's something healing about being able to share your story, but then also own it in some ways. That's part of the reason that we do the Expresión Fellowship, right? Alongside our friends at Storytellers for Change, because storytelling is a fundamental part of advocacy, right? And people change. There are people that are impacted by your story that either see themselves represented or see themselves reflected. And now they're willing to share their story. And then they share their story and somebody else is willing to share their story. And so Midwest Chicana and some of the other shows that we do, they're designed to do that. right? It's maybe there's something, there's an idea, there's some wisdom, there's some connection or belonging that occurs that allows others to show up differently in the spaces that they're in. And I think that that's transformative work.
Mhm.
uh, it could look like fun and games, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that we can't have fun. It doesn't mean that we can't do these things, but it also is like, and you're also having reactions to, because there's some things that
Right.
like you and I actually have had this over the last couple of weeks. There's some things that you and I just disagree on, right?
Yes. Yes. We're just like flat out yes.
And we're like, yeah, we're like, nah, I don't know, but I think that that's also cool because like we've also figured out how to like work through like agreement in some ways, right? And the only way to do that is for you to have courage to say like, this is, I disagree with you, and for me to have courage to say like, I disagree with you, and then for us to come together and be like, cool, we disagree on this, like what do we agree on, or
Yes.
like what is important here, or like can I listen to you and like understand where your perspective is, and maybe I shift my opinion, or maybe you shift your opinion.
Yeah. Or we just find a way to make it better, like,
Right.
which we have done on some topics. Like, it's like both not really, but then we got here and it was just like uplifting.
So that's the cool thing about it, right? And we're also just growing and trying to figure out how to get better. And
Yeah.
sometimes growth doesn't look like adding more people to the team or adding more programs. Sometimes growth is just like getting better at the stuff that we do, right?
Absolutely.
Or sometimes growing is also knowing that there's some stuff that we shouldn't be doing. Like,
Yeah.
you know, some innovations and some ideas maybe didn't work.
Mhm.
And so I think that's kind of where we are. And so I'm going to put you on the spot though, and I'm going to say that, you know, there's a point where you didn't want to do the Midwest Chicana podcast a couple
Yeah.
of weeks ago.
Yeah. And I think that falls in line with identity. And I don't think I could have said that into our conversation this week, of really understanding what that is. Right. And I think I have a lot of work to do on my own identity and knowing that I can show up fully as myself, and the people around me trust me. Um, and they know who I am and they want me to show up that way.
Yeah.
Like, they're not saying, hey, hide your tattoos. Hey, don't talk about this. Like, everyone has been so supportive. And I think that has opened the doors to others who may have felt like me to be like, yo, thank you. Like, you made me feel good about showing up.
Yeah.
I'll have to share a story. Like, my daughter Penelope, she rushed for the first time, right? And I think for me, that's something that, in my wildest dreams, would I ever imagine myself or even my kid rushing? Like, I don't even think that was in our vocabulary, right? And to hear how the experience was and the beautifulness of sisterhood that she experienced that, and it's a Latina sorority on top of it, which is even more phenomenal. She's never really had a community. And I feel like, and this is so crazy, she's doing better in college than she ever did in high school. Grade wise, community wise, expression wise. So I know not everybody has that experience. And so definitely want to say that. But this experience that my child is experiencing is something I never, ever thought was going to happen. And I'm just so proud. And I know there's so many kids out there that maybe don't have that opportunity to do the things that they love to do, or even be able to express themselves in the way they do. And I think that's why these organizations that are centered around Latino Chicanos are so important, because it's not that we're trying to segregate ourselves. It really is because we're trying to ensure that our voices of those that need it know that they have that space, right? Just even a space, just even coming into the LEC feels like home to a lot of people.
Yeah. I got asked yesterday. It was towards the end of the day. It was like, why are you only doing this for Latinos?
Really? You got asked that question.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So it's interesting you brought that up, and I know that there are team members on our team who have like been in other meetings, and they get asked kind of a similar question, right? Like, why do you need to focus on this? Like, we should be thinking about all kids, and we should be thinking about, and I think fundamentally, like, are you all thinking about us?
Yeah. We're back to Midwest Chicana. Like, I love this. This is exactly,
And
yes.
and and that's not to be like combative or anything, but like, are y'all
No,
thinking about us? Because if you were thinking about us, then like you might see more of us in places.
100%.
You might see, I don't know, like just more evidence of that,
Mm-hmm.
right? You might see people going to the Chicano Art Festival and not being afraid to attend. You might
Absolutely.
you might see, I don't know, people say like, you know what, I really don't understand how to do this language access work, but like we have questions and we want to make it better, and so you might reach out to other people, right?
Mhm.
You might like so there's so many ways where like on that question around like why are you just doing it for this group of people, I've learned to ask the question like, well, have you considered us?
Yeah. How many times do you hear the fact that I was the only Latino Chicano in the room?
I mean, like we're still in spaces,
Yeah.
right? And I think about this because I think one of the interesting things for me is that um, there are plenty of conversations that are happening around education that don't happen in classrooms or in school buildings,
Mhm.
right? And we're missing educator voice, we're missing administrator voice, but educators and administrators are doing the day-to-day work, right? They're
Mhm.
in the buildings, they're doing the hard work, and they're showing up. And so there are conversations out there that are happening that just don't include them in some ways and shape. And so I think this is like the power of advocacy, and this is why I think community is important, because community is responsible as well for education, and the community is responsible as well for supporting educators, and community is responsible as well for supporting others, right? And I think this is where like the conversations get more tricky, because how do you create champions in people who are in rooms that you can't be in or may not be able to be in or you don't have time to be in? And like that's also the way that I think about the work, right? So how do you relay the messages, and how do you push, and how do you listen, and how do you, like, when you're asked a question, like how do you respond in a way that affirms the community and that creates that opportunity for people to consider a different perspective? And I think I just ranted off on that one too, but like, you
You
know,
did. That's exactly what needs to be said. And what I love to ask you right now, and this is just the rawness. An aspiring teacher, right? Thinking about it, maybe even not even thinking about it, but in their head, they're like, I'm in this field and I love just the educating part of it, right? I don't know really how to go beyond that, but I think there may be some education piece. What do you as LEC, us as LEC, do when we find somebody like that?
yeah. So that's a really great question. I think I'm learning some language around what we do, right? Because like some language escapes me. So I think there's a version of an intake that we do, right? So that person, that young person, is going to meet with somebody on our team, and we're going to have an initial like one-on-one kind of introduction. Like, who are you? What are you about? What do you want to see? What do you want? Right? Like
Yeah.
out of this, like, what is it that you're hoping to accomplish? Two. We try to connect them to the best resource, right? Like, because we don't have all the answers.
I love that right there. Right. Like we know we're not the ones that have everything.
Right. We
Yeah.
have some opinion, like we form some opinions, and
Mhm.
like they're informed opinions because we've been doing it, right? But again, like there are plenty of people that it's an access thing, right?
Mhm.
So let's say an aspiring educator comes to us and says, like, I don't know about financials, or like I don't know about like how my money, or I don't know if I can pay for this. Well,
Mhm.
great. Have you talked to how we connected you to the Hispanic Development Fund? You know,
Absolutely.
we've made a commitment to donate $5,000 a year to the Hispanic Development Fund. They match it, it becomes $10,000. It's not a lot of money, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there's a lot of money, but collectively I think we're either on year 4 or 5, so we've
Yeah.
over time like donated either 40 or $50,000 matched,
Mhm.
um, to support aspiring educators, because we know every little bit helps. It's not everything that they need, but it's something. And so it might be connecting them to that phenomenal resource in our community. Um, they might need other supports, in which we're like, you know what, let's connect you to somebody at Guadalupe Centers who can support you
Yes.
here. If they're working through some issues, maybe they need a little bit of behavioral health support. Like, all right, Maddie Rhodes, like, here you
Mhm.
go. Like, how do we partner with Maddie Rhodes? And so being intentional about this idea that like we have great organizations in our community that are willing to help, they're willing to step up, but they may not have access to is that, right? Now, it could be like, you know what? I don't know how to advocate for this in my classroom. Okay, cool. Well, here's some educators who have done this really well. Or like, I've experienced this, and here's some tips that I would give to you, right? Oh, or are you looking for a mentor, right? And so here's somebody that I know that is looking to connect with you in these ways. And so if it works and it works well, like we have our intake, we have our conversation, we share the resource, but then the most important thing is like, how are we following up?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Did you get what you need? Awesome. Did that work for you? Great. What else do you need?
Mm-hmm.
And so the work, if we do it well, is intensive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like it's not about like us putting together a cohort or putting together um, a like 2-3 week program and like, all right, you're ready to go. Like it is about like if somebody's checking in on you all the time and seeing how you're doing, like particularly if you have a relationship with us and we built a relationship, like that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. It's building relationships. I mean, at the end of the day, that's our work.
And you know, I think we can get better at building relationships, right, across the board. And like that's a challenge that like is a meaty challenge to solve. I see organizations that do it really well. I see organizations that don't, and like I'm still trying to figure out how we do it, right, and how do we
Yeah.
evaluate that. But it is this more intensive approach to this work. And as I talk to other folks in this space, particularly around educator retention and recruitment, um, I think some things that people don't recognize or appreciate is that like it requires that level of intensity,
Yeah.
right? Particularly if the educator, a young educator, goes into an environment where they don't feel like anybody's paying attention to them.
Absolutely.
That happens more often than not, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're not being paid attention by the own employer that you have, and like maybe you feel lost and you ask questions there, like who do you go to?
Yeah.
And we want to be that organization, right? We want to be the organization that you go to and you feel comfortable asking and doing that. And so that's part of our work. I don't know if that answered your question.
Oh
But
yeah, it did. I just want because I know there's a lot of people that ask, well, how do you do this? Like, or even this next question, how do they get a hold of us? Like, tell them the process.
you
Or
get a
if there
hold
is
of us.
one. Yes.
Well, you know, it's funny. So right now I'm trying to figure out how we fix this website that we got.
And that's just being raw. Like
That's
seriously,
be raw. That's
you
like,
have 3
or wait,
organizations that you're trying to put into one thing.
well, we're not. So we're trying to forget the 3 organizations or whatnot. Like it's less about like the structure of the work and more about like you're right. Like how do you communicate with us? So I think we've been really good with referrals, right? People are referring folks to us, and so that's part of it. You can actually sign up through some of our links and whatnot, and so I get to witness the people that are signing up, and then I forward them to the right person, and then I follow up with folks and saying like, hey, if you follow up with this person, yada yada yada. And so there's some level of accountability there that we've implemented. Um, some people are like word of mouth, right? And so you've seen this happen to you. They come to a lot of your event, and then they tell you like, oh, my daughter wants to be an educator, or my daughter is an educator, and so like now then you connect them to Susana, or you connect them to Ivan or whoever on the team, right? And so like it's in a very organic way. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Simple as that. But also just coming into the office, right? 2203
Yeah,
Lexington
you know what's
Avenue.
really cool? So when we got the office space, we were right after the pandemic. We knew that we were going to hire some people and that we would need some office space, and so that was kind of like the basis of like getting the space. But one thing that I've learned and have grown with is that because we have an office and we have a space, we have folks that visit us,
Mm-hmm.
right? Folks that show up. And sometimes it's not planned. Sometimes there's not a scheduled meeting. Sometimes people are just showing up and then asking questions. And so it's really cool to see the team like show up and like answer and help direct and guide and like here's how you do these things. But it also makes us a part of the neighborhood that we're in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so we're situated at 2203 Lexington Avenue in Kansas City, Missouri. We're part of the historic Northeast. And we are in the Pendleton Heights neighborhood. And so um, there's additional responsibilities and commitments that we have as neighbors that like are maybe outside of our scope of work, right? Like here's what we do, but we also have a responsibility because we also know that like there are young people in our neighborhood that like we know we want to support.
Yes,
So
absolutely. Okay, so a last fun question. What are you doing with this big old weekend? Like Super Bowl weekend? I'm not sure how you feel about football, but or let's just say Taylor Swift on top of that, but
all the loaded questions there.
I know.
So, I heard that Taylor announced that she was going to drop her new album, and it's
Yes.
with the Midnight Poets department, or not the Midnight Poets department. I'm messing it up. Oh, the Swifties are going to get me.
No, it's like that. I keep thinking Dead
The
Poets
Tortured
Society.
Poets.
Yeah, Tortured Poets, but I keep
Poets
saying Dead
department.
Poets Society. I have Robin Williams in my mind every time it gets said. So
It's the Dead Poets Society, or the Dead Poets Society. Um, so and I think I heard she won album of the year.
yeah,
And so I think she's incredibly successful, and I've also read articles where she's brought in what $300+ million. So like I think that's a win for everybody. And then I heard that Kelsey's jersey is like skyrocketing. It was number 4 last time I saw it and whatnot. So that's a win for Travis and the Chiefs. And so like it's incredible when folks like Taylor see the awesomeness of Kansas City and can appreciate that and also fall in love with it maybe.
yeah,
Um,
and support it.
this is, our 4th Super Bowl, right? And
Yeah,
so I don't think the 49ers are going to win,
yeah, I
honestly.
know.
I think that the Chiefs kind of have it in the bag, and I'll be surprised if they don't do it. So, and actually, I don't have a lot of qualms that they won't.
Yeah.
Um, I'm excited to see some friends in Las Vegas, and they're having a good time already.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Hopefully they got to go to that bar. We went to that bar when we're in Vegas, the
Yeah.
Chiefs bar. It's so amazing.
And so, yeah, I think it's an exciting time. I also now, the real question that I have is like, will we shut down on the 14th for the parade?
Ooh. And we had parent teacher conferences that night as well.
So, it's also Valentine's Day.
It
So,
is.
like, there's a lot of important things going on that day,
Yes.
and clearly, like the parade will happen.
Yes.
So
It's,
it's a fun time to be a Kansas City.
yeah, and Valentine's Day is my mother-in-law's birthday.
See,
So even more, probably be at home rather than even at the Super Bowl parade. So yeah,
so
absolutely.
are they going to win? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And was that good?
It
Did I do
was,
well?
you did amazing. You did
Fantastic.
amazing. I'm telling you. I mean, you can't, it's beautiful. It's just beautiful. Yes. Well, we have so much going on. I mean, I know we can find it on all our social medias. Thank you, Lexi, for posting a lot of that. But there's a lot of events coming up for sure. So we definitely want you to stay connected. If you can't find us, like, he said the website's a little bit wonky right now, but we have all our social media pages and links that you can go in and definitely, and also reach out on Messenger. Like my Messenger, I know our team's messengers are always open and willing to support in that way as well. So yeah, we have lots of availability.
Yeah, and I'll also say like we have lots of opportunities to grow, right?
Yeah.
As a community organization, and so I always welcome direct feedback. I'm happy to put my email in the chat, and I'll follow up and have a conversation because I think ultimately the work that we do is critical,
Yeah.
and we want to do it well.
Okay, give us last goodbye. Like, what do you want to say to everybody?
Last goodbye.
Not that kind of thing. You know what I
Wow.
mean? Kind of like how the mayor said the city's on fire. Not literally.
The city is on fire, but Latinos are the fuel.
Woo.
And like we have to understand and appreciate that. And
Yes.
when we think about the Kansas City of the future, we're thinking about a Latino Kansas City, right? We're thinking about a community that should be language accessible. We should have a community that there's Latino public art. We should have a community that has professionals and leaders who are from and look like the community that they serve. We should have the best education systems in not just in the state, but at the country level, at the country, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that the city is on fire. I love that we got the World Cup coming in 2026.
Yes.
I'm excited about the new stadium, CBKC Stadium for KC Current. being the first women's professional soccer stadium in the country. Like I got concerns around affordable housing and like gentrification and all these other issues that are impacting our neighborhoods. But the reality is like, if Kansas City is on fire, Latinos are the fuel.
Absolutely. Are we going to end it right there?
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to get quoted. That's amazing. I'm going to start quoting that. Well, thank you all so much. This was the initial Midwest Chicana podcast in person. So a lot of the others is going to be audio, but we're going to get back to in person as well. So Edgar, thank you so much. Like you're phenomenal. And I
appreciate it.
spending this time with you on here. So, and I know others love seeing you on this platform. So we just appreciate you.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for folks who have joined us and listened. Appreciate you all, and I hope to see you somewhere soon.
Yes. Goodbye, everybody.